Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.
It is the Stay Off My Operating Table podcast with Dr. Philip Ovadia. Thanks for being here. We are joined today by a return guest, Dr. Robert Kiltz. He and I were talking about stuff before we started recording that I think would definitely be worth getting into. But before we do that, Phil, why don't you set the table for us?
Yeah, and I got some stuff to discuss as well. Dr. Kiltz needs no introduction, a legend in the carnivore space and a repeat guest, and certainly encourage everyone to go back and listen to the first time we had him on. But Rob has got an amazing background, gynecologist by training and fertility specialist, and just all sorts of amazing stuff that he does and has been doing in the carnivore space, and just was time to have him back on for another conversation. Rob, why don't you give the brief background in case people don't know you and didn't listen to the first episode, and maybe just talk a little bit about what you've been up to lately, and then we'll get to some topics that I have on my mind and I know Jack has on his mind as well.
Well, Phil and Jack, thank you so much for the invitation. I love watching and listening to everything and reading your books. Really helpful and inspiring. I'm a fertility doctor. I own and run CNY Fertility Centers, which is one of the largest but most affordable and integrated fertility centers in America. And I've been doing that for about 30 years now. Based on OBGYN, I went into fertility. I've double boarded. And over the years, I found myself realizing I didn't know why people were sick. And people were getting sicker, not getting pregnant when I thought they should get pregnant, and some of them getting pregnant when I thought they shouldn't. I integrated Eastern and Western practices about 20 years ago with massage, acupuncture, prayer, yoga, trying to sort of de-stress people on the journey because the stress of the process held them away from the treatments or they dropped out quickly. Some of my patients were doing something called paleo diet way back when, and they were getting pregnant. And I was like, what the heck is that? And I started digging into paleo and then keto and carnivore. And I suffered from many things for years: arthritis, psoriasis, migraines, bowel bleeding, kidney stones, the list goes on. I healed when I found carnivore. I've been sharing it ever since. I'm just really deep into the keto and carnivore space. I think it's one of the best ways that we can all heal and stay off of Phil's operating table and out of my IVF center in order to heal yourself. So really inspired to help humanity heal. And that's really my mission in life today.
Phil, I want to ask about, I'll just ask it, and then we'll go there if you want to, and if not, we'll go back to Rob said prior to starting the recording. One of the enduring questions I have, enduring, not endearing, enduring questions I have about carnivore is whether or not some people, probably because of ethnicity, ancestral heritage, don't handle the higher fat diet as well as others, simply because of how the bodies they inherited from their ancestors. Is that a thing? I know some people believe it is. Some people have uninformed opinions.
I think it's actually the opposite, that because of our ancestral heritage, many people don't handle plants or refined carbohydrates as well as others do, because there are some that were forced into a modern diet in the last few hundred years, where others have evolved in farming and a lot of more processed plants for more thousands of years than others. I think all of us tolerate fat, but When we talk about fat, what are we talking about? Because most people talk about cooked fat rather than raw fat, because rendered fat is not the same as raw fat. And I think that's what we're more tolerable to. The other problem is that we're brainwashed to believe that fat is bad. Being fat is bad, eating fat is bad. And so psychologically, our brains automatically turn off to anything with fat. I've seen carnivores eat a steak and I see all the fat left on their plate. They never touched it. And I think that it's psychologically a problem, which affects our physiology in the sense of we have reactions, we have anxiety, or we have stomach pains and things like that to consuming something we've been taught is bad for us.
Yeah.
But I think if you look back, few people really ate rendered fat. They mostly ate raw fat or barely cooked fat for a long time. And I think when you render fat, you glycate it, you damage the molecular structure, and our body's not used to that. And many of us still, I think that's where we don't tolerate it as well.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. I mean, I think all of the sort of ancestral evolutionary evidence we have points to it was the fat that allowed us to evolve as human beings. Fat is essential. And, I think people that are coming from low fat diets, like, so many people are, because like Rob said, that's what we're programmed to believe is healthy. There's certainly some adaptation that you may need to go through as you introduce more fat into your diet. I think there are types of fats, again, like Rob alluded to, that maybe are problematic. And, but ultimately, there is no reason to think that humans ever ate a low fat diet prior to, 70 years ago or so. It wouldn't even be possible, honestly. And, the low fat is the sort of experimental diet. And that diet, I would argue, none of us are adapted to eat. And the results of the low fat experiment have failed spectacularly, as we oftentimes talk about here. I would agree that genetically, ancestrally, all of that, we are all meant to eat high fat diets, and we need to return to that. And it's, kind of amazing when I look at just the landscape these days, right? And, the patients I work with, right? And we're looking at sort of advanced, lab metrics and all of this stuff, which may or may not be necessary, but it is, what we do in our modern. Mm-hmm. And my answer to them is usually eat more fat. Eat more saturated fat in particular. And it's just amazing, what a sort of visceral reaction you get from most people on that, because they've heard the exact opposite their whole lives. But the opposite was never true. And now we're just trying to undo the damage from that.
Interesting. I was watching something on the development of supermarkets, and literally 100 years ago, there weren't any. Right? You went to your butcher, and I'm just wondering, did your butcher already cut you a lean piece of meat? So when you got there, you get a lean piece of meat, or really the butcher was cutting part of the beef or the lamb, the goat, or the chicken. You were getting the whole thing. You were getting a lot more fat. So even 200 years ago or 100 years ago, why would you kill the animal? You ate the nose to tail, and there was nothing missing. And so our modern world basically has processed our food into something that we never ate for the first 3.5 million years anyway. We didn't really eat fat like we just bought fat, or maybe some people did, because it's still the best thing to eat, by the way. But you ate the whole animal and not the lean piece of tenderloin, because, that was worthless to just seek that out. It's not good for us.
All right. Any more you guys want to talk about on that, or should we go to the thing Rob brought up before we started recording?
Yeah, I actually have something I was reading the other day, and I thought of Rob, and I'd love to discuss this. And a little bit of a heads up, Jack, we might get into the weeds here a little bit, pull us back. But I was, reading more about vitamin C. And, one of the interesting things about vitamin C is its chemical structure is very similar to sugar. to glucose. And it seems that, vitamin C may have a lot to do with a lot of the things you talk about, right? The endothelial damage, the glycocalyx, the lining of our blood vessels that's protecting those blood vessels from the damage that ultimately might lead to atherosclerosis. I'd love to get your thoughts on vitamin C, and related to carnivore, right? One of the criticisms often levied against carnivore diets is that it's, low or absent in vitamin C. Maybe talk about that aspect of it as well.
On every bottle of every vitamin, it's a FDA disclaimer says this is not intended to treat any disease or any condition. So I always am suspect of vitamins anyway, because no other organism eats a vitamin in isolation. And so we're studying vitamins in isolation, which we've never proven their true benefits. And we should be thinking of that more than anything. But briefly about the glycocalyx, think of the layer on every cell of our body, and every cellular organelle contains a phospholipid bilayer embedded with proteins with sugars called glycans, which spew inside and outside of every cell of our body, and every epithelial layer, including our skin, our vessels, our GI tract. And those sugars called glycans make up the glycocalyx, which is critical for as a barrier for come in, stay out. It's got a charge that keeps things from sticking. When you wear off the glycocalyx, which is made of sugar, and the best way to dissolve something is to use something like it a lot. And so sugar dissolves sugar. The more you eat sugar, the more the glycocalyx of the GI tract is dissolved, which causes leaky gut, allows the microbes that have a opposite charge now to be attracted. Remember, the same charges repels. And so the negative and positive come together, and that's how those microbes find their spot in the gut and entrench themselves to cause ulcers and cancers and all sorts of inflammatory troubles. Now, real
quick, just to make sure I understand this. It's an electrochemical binding. It's not a mechanical binding.
Everything's electrically charged. It's all electrical charges that actually determines.
I just always assumed this was that the way this stuff all plugged together was basically the way Legos plug together.
It looks like a mechanical connection, but it's electrical, because remember, everything's a charge. And even if you look at an atom, they're charges that bring molecules together, and some of them are more stronger and some of them repel. But my suspicion is what we're missing is the understanding of the glycocalyx, which is the barcode, which is the transmitter and the receiver of everything. And all organisms have their own glycocalyx, their own barcode. And plants tend to have a higher mannose sugars. Humans have a lower mannose sugars, but basically it's a barcode. Our human leukocyte antigen, HLA marker, is a sugar layer that's bound by molecules that, if you take the number of DNA codes to make the RNA, to make the protein structure with amino acids, there's only so many proteins the body can make. But because of the glycobiome, there's infinite more expressions of the DNA protein that can happen because of the glycobiome. And I don't know these numbers exactly, but think of the number of amino acids that code for the thousands of proteins, which could code for the millions of glycoproteins. And so the glycocalyx is the one thing that no one's really understanding or talking about. But imagine the grasslands in America without grass, without no trees, without grass, nothing. Is there life there easily? It's very little. And so there's erosion, there's breakdown. It's actually the sugars that create the environment that we live in. And the sugars are critical in and on every cell of our body.
So
And
you're saying that the sugars are like the grass.
they're like the grass.
Okay.
So the forests, the tundra, the deserts, are there a lot of plants in the desert? Is there a lot of life in the desert? I mean, it depends which desert, but the Sahara Desert doesn't have any visible life to us that lives in an abundant way that we live. And the environment changes. And my bet is this is one of the reasons for leaky gut, cardiovascular disease, because we eat a tremendous amount of plants which have foreign sugars. And if you think about it, what's the leading cause of allergic reactions? It's sugars, and it's plant sugars. So we're allergic to the plant sugars. Just if I put my O negative blood into, mine can go into a lot of people, but yours can't go into other people's very easily. You create the antibodies. But same thing with an organ. The HLA, human leukocyte antigen. Oh, and by the way, your blood type is not determined by your proteins. It's determined by a sugar. The sugars are different. And that's the part that very few people understand and know anything about that. We're sort of skimming over it, but is actually probably the most important part of our body.
So when you say the sugars are different, different sugars are why we have different blood types.
Right. So
I may regret asking this question, but can you unpack that a little bit?
There are hundreds of sugars. We only talk about glucose.
Right.
But glucose, galactose, mannose, fucose, N-acetylglucosamine, N-acetylgalactosamine, sialic acid, xylose. Those are just a few. There are approximately 9 main sugars that flow through the human body that are part of the human glycocalyx. But there are other sugars that are more abundant in other organisms. Every organism, every bacteria, yeast, every macrobe and microbe, every grasshopper, every cell of all of us, including trees, contain a membrane of a phospholipid bilayer with proteins and sugars that determine who and what it is and how it functions. And so if you damage those sugars, and I believe the biggest damage is not only plant sugars, but the fermentation in our guts from the bacteria, yeast, and viruses that actually damage our body because of the high sugar plant content and fiber, which allows the microbes. Remember, microbes are everywhere.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're good for you. So we have made a story out of good bacteria and bad bacteria, but that's a made up story. We don't have any real science on that. Unfortunately, I think we have a lot of manipulated science because we're selling a product. And we know that's been one of the biggest problems in medicine and science. We can't trust it because it's selling something that you step back and wait a minute. If I put that bacteria in my bloodstream, is it good for me? Or an open wound or a uterus? I bet it's not. Now, okay, vitamin C. I don't really even understand, other than we've been told it's important because it causes scurvy. When was the last time you saw scurvy, Phil?
Yeah, still waiting to see my first case of that one.
How about rickets?
Despite all the carnivores that I hang out with.
I mean, we've not seen rickets either. And
Right.
So I have a low vitamin D level. I don't have rickets. I never measure my vitamin C, but I do know I have chronically low vitamin D. I've never felt better in my life. I don't have rickets. I don't supplement. I eat fatty meat. I eat liver. I take some liver supplements or organ meat supplements, but I don't know. I do because I don't always eat my liver or meat, and I psychologically think women, maybe I should, but I don't think the problem with science, it's in an isolated environment in a lab, in a dish with a PhD student who must publish something in order to get accolades or get his PhD degree or get paid for the science and research he's taught to do. I mean, I don't know that Linus Pauling, we've ever proven that high dose vitamin C is like the answer. We're still searching for a place for vitamins, unfortunately, but sugars, I was actually watching a small little video about looking at the massive trees of the world. Where do they get the majority of their mass structure? They get it from carbon dioxide in the air. And most of the hydrogen and oxygen actually also comes from, the water that they bring up, but it's mostly carbon dioxide that they get most of that structure, which I thought was very interesting. And something from nothing. I always say you get this massive tree from carbon dioxide you and I can't see. But we are created without sugars, we're dead. And when you eat meat, fatty meat, even fat cells, there's a ton of sugar in there. It's just not a foreign sugar. And it's probably in different amounts that you and I don't even understand.
Yeah, and it was looking at kind of Linus Pauling's work that got me thinking about all of this. And the interesting thing is he hypothesized that it was a vitamin C deficiency that was leading to this damage to the blood vessels, which again, I don't think he was able to appreciate, is the glycocalyx damage that you've been talking about. And it may just be that, the high sugar in the diet is sort of competing with the vitamin C. And, one of the things that has been demonstrated, and, we just alluded to it, carnivores are thought not to get any vitamin C in their diet. There's some debate about whether there is actually vitamin C in fresh meat. Preserved meat doesn't appear to have any vitamin C, and that may have been a problem for these, seamen,
sailors,
the sailors that got scurvy in the first place. But it may be the high sugar diet that's the body's vitamin C that's leading to the problems. And Linus Pauling hypothesized that you could just supplement the vitamin C at high doses. But again, it seems to point to me the answer is take the sugars out of your diet.
When we say the word sugar, what do we really mean by it? Or carbohydrate, what do we mean by it? Where do they come from? They come from plants.
Right.
And I don't know anyone that's allergic to a ribeye steak, but many people are allergic to plants, different plants, huge variety of plants. And also cow's milk. We're allergic to cow's milk. That's not our milk. It's if I put the wrong organ HLA marker into you or the wrong blood type into you, you're going to have an allergic reaction. So we have to think of everything as a sugar or a foreign sugar. That's the real problem, that the HLA type of the sugar doesn't match yours. We can eat plants. Interesting enough, if you cook the plants well and you ferment them or soak them or cook them and add fat, you may actually reduce the amount of allergic reactions that you get from that. But, do you want to be the one that you get tried out on that? I don't know. And you don't have an EpiPen.
Exactly. Part of, kind of the amazing, I guess, work you could say that our ancestors had to do to figure out the very small percentage of plant life that we can, even detoxify to the point that we can eat it, right? The vast majority of the plant world is, poisonous to the point that we can't even come up with ways to detoxify it.
And I imagine in today's time, the majority of our foods we eat were typically those that have been around for a while. So most human beings have been able to tolerate it. Most of them have been processed and they've been canned for salted and soaked and vinegars and things like that. So it's only recently that we've had some tremendous amount of fresh fruits and vegetables on any significance. And I really think it's the movement for fresh, whole grass and grains and lean meat, which is the biggest culprit in our chronic and acute diseases we're all suffering from.
Okay. I want to know, I have a thousand different, one of the goals for this podcast is for people to walk away after having listened to a podcast and either have an action step they can take or at least have a set of questions that, God, I don't like it when it does that.
Yeah, I love it when it does
Sorry
that.
to hear.
It loves it when it does that.
At least know where to go to start answering some of their questions. So I think the provocative statement that you made is you believe that the root of our chronic diseases goes back to You say it the way you said it because there's no point in going through my filter since you're here.
Our modern world has prepared and processed our food, and we're primarily getting too many raw vegetables, seeds and nuts, grass and grains, and lean meat that ultimately is very antigenic. It feeds the microbes in your gut. It causes them to overgrow. They go up the esophagus into the upper and lower respiratory system. They go down through the rectum, anus, into the vagina for women, the reproductive system and the bladder, and they infect men in similar ways. They go through the penis and infect the bladder. For women, they go up into the uterus, tubes, ovaries, and intraperitoneal cavity and cause all sorts of reproductive disorders. And so if, maybe I'm making this too complicated, I apologize. Maybe I missed that one statement. But basically, if you eat fatty meat that you got from your local butcher or your farm yourself, and you collected your seasonal fruits and vegetables, and you ate them fresh, cooked them well, not raw, and you ate less frequently, you probably would be healthier. Now, I'm not against Mediterranean diets or paleo diets or even keto diets. Keto is more a scientific term, by the way. I think paleo and Mediterranean are more cultural diets more people can understand, but it's adding fat, and adding as much raw fat is probably the best thing you could do, in my opinion, no matter what you're eating. We're all sort of scared of fat. And the only real easily accepted fat is actually butter, not ghee, butter. And because butter still contains a lot of the natural molecules that the mammary glands produced that are healthier for you. But some people can't tolerate cow's milk. Try another one. The fat, raw fat. And I just want to tell you one story that bears in general become hyperphagic. I mean, they have a big appetite towards the end of summer, fall, and maybe it's even early summer to midsummer, depending on the altitude, because it's going to start getting cold and wintry earlier than we know. They must gain 1,000 to 2,000 pounds in order to get fat enough to hibernate, gestate, or nest. And many other organisms have to do that because they need to migrate long distances. Some fowl, some birds, they get fat in order to be able to migrate. And in hibernation for 6 months, that a mama bear may gestate 1 to 4 baby cubs. It loses no muscle mass, bone mass, but it loses only one thing: fat. So fat is not only the fuel for the mom to survive without drinking, eating, pissing, or pooping, it also builds healthy cubs. What tissue did it provide that from? Only adipose tissue. So we give adipose tissue a negative for you, when in fact it's a positive more than you know. But where do the poisons come from that cause all the inflammation in your body? Your plant-based diet that fuels the microbes, which circulates throughout your body. And if you think about dysentery and pneumonia, it's rampant in this world. It's been rampant in this world. And James Henry Salisbury Stake brother graduated Albany Med in 1850s. He went to the Civil War and figured out that his men were dying of a plant-based diet, switched them to a meat-based diet, and they healed. Plus, he wrote a lot because he was a chemist and a microscopist. Great stories to help us understand the science behind it. So that's why I'm always flabbergasted when we say that the microbes, there's good bacteria and bad bacteria. That's just hard to know which one, depending. It's dark out on the street. There's no street lights.
Man, I want to dive deeper on that, the good bacteria, bad bacteria thing. So
it's like good fat and bad fat. Is an avocado fat or is it a fruit?
I think the answer is yes.
It's a fruit.
Oh, okay.
Highly antigenic. My daughter would die to it. So is infertility, is arthritis, or is liver damage an allergic reaction? Everything we know is an allergic reaction. Is heart disease an allergic reaction, right? It's chronic inflammation, local allergies. Remember, we think of allergies on the outside of the skin, or we're sniffing and coughing and things like that, but we forget the same thing: swelling, heat, dysfunction, pain, and eventually damage to the cell is caused by the same things happen on the outside, happens on the inside. And that's the part we can just clear apart, and we could simplify the story. The problem is, I don't understand much of the science that everyone's spewing out there because I'm not that smart. And 99.9% of the people, when I say smarts, knowledgeable about what we're talking about. It's a different foreign language. All the scientific journals are foreign languages. Phil's stuff would be foreign to mine, and vice versa, and things like that. But ultimately, we need to communicate in a simple way that our brothers and sisters around the globe can understand that eat fatty meat. Okay, you throw in a little plants, cook them, add the fat, enjoy life, and eat less frequently, and get off the treadmill, go for a walk, hang out with Phil and Jack and, your brothers and sisters, wherever you're at. That's what we need to do more of.
Kind of picking up on what you just said, what's been so interesting to me over the past, years that I've been sort of on this journey is, talking to someone like you. And here we are, I'm a heart surgeon, right? And I come at this and I'm looking at heart disease and I come to a certain set of answers. You're a, gynecologist, infertility doctor, and you come to a certain set of answers. And somehow those problems that really don't seem to have anything to do with each other, heart disease and infertility, one occurs in young people, one occurs in old people. The organs don't really seem to have any connection. And yet we come to the same answer. And the answer to both of our problems is the same. And that's what's been so interesting about all of this, because, when I look at the answers in the world of heart disease, right, they're really the traditional, the mainstream answers, we'll say, right? They're only focused on heart disease. Cholesterol, right? Lowering cholesterol as a proposed solution to heart disease. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say lowering cholesterol has any benefit except to lowering heart disease. And when, you and I and so many others come along and say, eat fatty meat, and it's fixing your heart, it's fixing your, reproductive tract, it's fixing your brain, it's fixing, almost every organ system now we can touch with this solution. So I'd love to kind of, what are your thoughts about that?
We breathe, drink, and eat. And what we breathe, drink, and eat gets into our body, and everything out there is a foreign substance that has antigenic capabilities in our body. And once it gets into our respiratory system or gastrointestinal system, it goes into our cardiovascular system or lymphatic system, and it goes everywhere rapidly. And so your heart, I'm reproduction, then there's a skin guy and the lung guy, and all of us in this have our specialties in our standard healthcare system. But ultimately, inflammation is the cause of all disease. Now, why one person suffers from brain problems, skin problems, eye problems, heart problems, liver, kidney, or any reproductive problems, we don't know that answer. It's kind of like 10% of people smoke cigarettes die of lung cancer. My grandmother lived 104. She smoked Pall Malls and drank Manhattans, and she ate primarily a Mediterranean diet. And so I think really what we're about is, how do we simplify the story and come to a consensus? The truth is, inflammation causes disease. We know that. I think the major causes of inflammation are plant sugars, plant antigens, plant chemicals, and the fermentation of those plants and the products it makes, along with the increased population of microbes that really are not good for us. And then the fifth one is excessive exercise, and that's a whole other story. But I believe we're pushed to do too much exercise, and we shouldn't be doing it, in my opinion. But
We have the headline for this episode. Dr. Kiltz, you're exercising too much.
And again, what animal or exercises purposely to lose weight in this world or get healthy? Zero. And is it better to be skinny or fat in a famine or in the herd? I mean, are we going after the skinniest, scrawniest animal, or do you want to hunt the big ones, the fat ones? Because that's where the health is. And we do know that. You can have someone obese and live a long time according to how we have graded them in this modern world of medicine. But we know what skinny looks like and what anorexia and bulimia, cachexia is. That is bad. You don't have long to live. But I'm betting $1 billion obesity causes no disease. The same thing that got you obese got you sick. And you might be healthy now, even a skinny person, but you may drop dead when you didn't expect it. That's why I think the carnivore diet, but carnivore, paleo, and keto are high fat diets. And I'm sorry, avocados and seeds and nuts are not fat. They're actually antigenic substances that don't belong in our bodies of any significance or frequency. You can do it. You might be okay, like cigarette smokers or alcohol drinkers. And by the way, alcohol is not a healthy drink for anyone. You might have small amounts from time to time, but the American College of OBGYN has an expert opinion journal article came out 2 years ago. It recommends a plant-based, lean meat, no animal, no red meat, and red wine for pregnant lactating women once a day. Those are our experts in this world today. That's the sad part.
And we know that if we actually dug into it, we would find out that the study that came to that conclusion was funded by people who utterly coincidentally profit tremendously from people engaging in that sort of eating and drinking behavior.
And Phil knows this, like I know it. We work in standard medicine. We all kind of work hard together. The drug reps are kind of part of, part of our environment. They're all our buddies and friends. And the same thing goes in every area of science and medicine, by the way. And we tend to work in an area that we are attached to. We think we're going to do something way different, but we're all doing a very similar process. We want to do good for everyone. But our brains get distracted, and maybe we don't look at the things that might be important because we're just going to say this and do this and publish this, and it's okay. But in fact, we are seeing the deadly consequences of the cost of healthcare, both financially, physically, and certainly emotionally, psychologically. People are suicidal, criminals, all damage and disease to the brain and every organ system, I think contributes to the dysfunction of our cultures and societies around the globe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that fact is becoming kind of inescapable, right? And it's leading to I guess you could say, a bit of an optimistic situation that, we're starting to come to grips with that as a society, that all of this illness is literally threatening societies, and we're going to have to start dealing with it. And it seems to be becoming unavoidable that we're going to have to address our food if we're going to do that.
I think that's the surface, the pinnacle of what we need to do, because I did meditation, prayer, and exercise, and I ate a healthy diet, and yet I was debilitating more and more. And my best friend, Dave Kilmer, a great, amazing doctor that I admired, he was healthy, beautiful young children, and he gets cancer, and 3 months later, he's dead at 52. And that's what started saying, okay, why did my good friend Dave die as a healthy guy? And I'm getting sicker. Found this nutritional change and realizing that mindfulness, exercise, and stuff is one thing. But when you realize that we're mostly being convinced to eat a healthy diet which is actually unhealthy in 99% of the way. And we've been suffering for years from a plant-based diet for thousands of years. We just are seeing it more and more because we're more focused on it today than ever before. But our job is to heal our brothers and sisters. And if you can simply do it by going carnivore, okay, come on up and get keto. Vegan, vegetarians, Mediterraneans, everyone can do keto. But carnivore, everyone can do also, but it's a hard one because it just wraps our brains as standard doctors and standard scientists. And when the propaganda says, it's not the right word, the mainstream marketing says a plant-based diet is good and red meat is bad, and we're getting sicker. And I think ever since standard medicine, the Rockefeller Flexion Report came out, the supermarkets started getting bigger, and the same people that controlled the dollars, like the Rockefellers forever. And remember, I go back to the pharaohs. The same people controlled the story and the message because they control the armies, the peasants, the prisoners, and the soldiers. And ultimately, it's each individual needs to and deserves to know the simplicity of carnivore, which is fatty meat, salt water. One meal a day is the very best thing, and throw in some of Kiltz's ice cream from time to time. And maybe that's a simple one, Jack, you were looking for.
Bill, Rob and I were talking about his ice cream prior to you coming on. Oh, yes.
But the beauty of my ice cream, it's made out of cream, not milk. It's got more fat in it. It's got eggs. It has a small amount of cane sugar, not a lot. You see, I don't think small amounts of sugar from time to time are our disease cause. And I would argue that.
But you're saying that in an environment that you're primarily eating carnivore, and therefore you are not introducing all kinds of plant-based sugars into your body 2 or 3 or 4 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Correct. Look at my ice cream isn't meant to have all the time. It's desserts are time to time. And my ice cream, if you had cream and eggs and butter and some salt in it, you could have it as much as you want. Maybe, but I'm not a big pusher for that personally. But small amounts of cane sugar. Now, cane sugar is processed plant sugar, correct?
Right.
It's more pure. When you eat the whole plant, you're actually getting more of the antigens and the other chemicals that may be also harmful for us more than small amounts of cane sugar. And I'm going to throw in maybe small amounts of honey, but I just say minimize honey, fruit, or cane sugar. I don't do stevia or any of those fake things. If I'm going to have a little sugar, I'm a little cane sugar, small amounts from time to time. I don't think that's our killer. And one other thing, we are not addicts. You don't have a food disorder, an eating disorder. You've been plopped down in it. Take an alcoholic and let them live in a liquor store. Take any other human being and put them in a place that you can easily get food. What are you going to do? You're going to easily eat the food because finding food and finding the food is hard. So our brain is not dumb. The problem is we've created this environment of fast food, delivery food, and the marketing terms of that plants are good and meat is bad. Those two things combined make us want to eat the wrong food. But if it's the fall and you're a bear and there's a bunch of berries, you're not going to say, oh, I can't eat those. You're going to eat a lot of them because your genetic instinctual predisposition is going to want you to eat and get fat because you know that there's no food for the next 3 to 6 months and you have to either migrate, hibernate, gestate, or live through the wars and famines that other humans have caused for thousands of years.
My brain's going 2 different directions with this. One, there's this really simple takeaway from this conversation. Just give it up, folks. Just go carnivore. Just eat meat, add salt, drink water, get over yourselves, and just go carnivore. And the other direction is all the other things you said about the electrochemical bonds that are happening in our guts and the way that the bacteria migrate up and down, and that particular process may in fact be at the root of all our chronic disease, and that our chronic disease are primarily allergic reactions in our bodies. And I'll tell you, I've probably heard that 100 times before, but my conscious mind is telling me I've never heard that before. And it makes so much sense that what we're experiencing is an allergic reaction. I have a dear friend, actually my oldest friend in the world, who has always had weird allergic reactions to everything. And she's now dealing with cancer. And the medical term for we don't know what it is, idiopathic.
Which idiopathic means we're idiots.
That's what I always thought. We don't know what it is, so we have named you have idiopathic, whatever it is. And when I looked at her history of health problems for as long as I've known her, I can't help but wonder, is what she's really been dealing with is this just constant attack of allergic reactions, primarily to the food?
Well, we breathe, drink, and eat. And the environments we live in, they're highly antigenic. And that's really the simple story. And why one person gets one organ or another, we don't know that. I don't know about you. I grew up with Excedrin, with Tums, Pepto-Bismol, dihistamines. I grew up with so many drugs in my lifetime that I always had and always thought they were just normal. How many people do you know that don't have a cabinet full of those drugs?
Huh.
Everybody.
Everybody has those. Yeah.
And when I went carnivore, it took me a year to finally look inside my bag and say, I haven't touched those things in a year. And so we're built on a drug directed world, secondary to a diet that's for a pig, cow, and a sheep, and we're lions. So
we're built on a diet that's appropriate for a pig or a cow or a sheep, and we're lions.
There is a journal.
That character in Parks and Recreation, Ron Swanson, who was served a salad, and he looked up at the server and said, "You're giving me my food's food."
The United States Department of Agriculture Journal on Plant Poisoning. You ever read it?
Gosh, I keep meaning to do that, but
I know. It's sitting on it's on in the nightstand. But I never knew there was a journal on this, and there are books on this, on the livestock around the world that are damaged from a plant-based diet. They get sick from the plants they naturally eat. Did you know that?
No.
Okay, so if they get sick, someone loses money, but if you get sick, someone makes money. And so it really is the perfect idea. Yeah. Let us make up an idea, Phil and Jack and I, what can we do to get as many people sick so we can sell our drugs that were once plant medicinally based, and you go to the healer in the tribe or the clan and you'd heal, right? But today we need these drugs even more and more, so that rather than a natural plant, we go to an industrial plant to get the answer from the Pope, the priest, the president, the dictators, and kings and queens of the world that control the message. And we're just still the slave soldiers, peasants, and prisoners. And we go to our doctors. We respect our doctors, healthcare professionals, but they're chained up, and we're so biased in our professions. But I think our job is what you're doing, Phil, and is working to blow it up, offer this knowledge to every human being in the world through social media. And I know for you and I to go get into medical school was hard. The post-medical school training was hard, but the access was limited to everyone else. But now it's open to everyone else, and even more. And what you're sharing online here is saying to people, hey, listen, I'll take care of you if you come to me, but maybe we could do something to prevent this. Carnivore is the game changer, in my opinion. And eating like a lion not like a pig, cow, and a sheep is really what we're working to do. And there is real science to this. It's so simple.
Folks, I'm not sure what the takeaway from today is because I think there's about 9 takeaways from today. And
I think the takeaway is people need to, be following Rob and checking out his stuff. So, Rob, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
drkiltz.com is the best one, DOCTORKILTZ. The best way to find me, and on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I got some books on Amazon on keto, carnivore. I write a lot about faith, and I talk about fasting. I think I always say faith is first, fatty meat, eat the fatty meat, and I love fasting. I think that's one of the best things to do. I'm just finishing up. I'm trying to decide if I finish a 2-day fast or I go to 3. I don't know. I did 5 days last week. I'm just kind of in a little special spot right now that I'm finding that it's really powerful to fast. I think autophagy always happens. It just shows up more when you don't put the poisons in the body. And that's one of the most important things, that when you fast.
what's your opinion about dry fasting?
I don't think, I think we drink too much water, number one. And I think we drink too much distilled or empty water without minerals and those sort of things. But I've done 2 days of no food, no water, but I don't really find as valuable benefits. Now, there may be some people that might get something. And I don't know, Phil, if you have some other idea of that, but I've read a little bit about it. But, water is made when you make a protein. Every time an amino acid is attached to a protein, an H2O molecule is kicked off. Every time the acetyl-CoA goes through that little Krebs cycle, you make ATP, CO2, and H2O. And it's going at the speed of light, by the way. And glucose is never the energy for your cell. The function of the liver is to make fat. That is a major function of it. And insulin's job is to make fat in the liver. That is it. We make too complicated science out of these things because someone needed a PhD.
I think we should point out that Dr. Kiltz is a reproductive endocrinologist. So when he's talking about things like insulin, he's not talking out of his butt. He actually has some training in this.
Yeah, I think we just dropped some more nuggets that we're going to have to unpack in part 3 when we get Rob back on again. But as always, great interacting. I always love, I'm fortunate I get to talk to Rob a fair amount and hang out with him a couple of times a year at various events, but and it's never boring. And just glad we could bring you on again, Rob, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
I appreciate you and everyone listening, and we're all learning together. That's important. God bless.
Thanks for joining us, folks. This has been Stay Off My Operating Table. Our guest has been Dr. Robert Kiltz. Contact information will be in the show notes. And for Dr. Philip Ovadia, I'm Jack Heald. We'll talk to you next time.
Chances are you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if you didn't need to change your life and get healthier. So take action right now. Book a call with Dr. Ovadia's team. One small step in the right direction is all it takes to get started. Contact us at ifixhearts.com/talk. That's ifixhearts.com/talk.